Welcome to Authentically Woman, a sanctuary dedicated to empowering women. We are a faith based healing circle focused on changing perspectives and inspiring healing through authenticity and vulnerability. Join us in this journey of empowerment and healing. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Tinashe Mujera. I'm an author, I'm a marketplace professional, and I'm a woman of God. I am a representation of tested faith. I represent my healed wounds that left ugly scars. This is the Faith in Action podcast that has been created to help you find the journey to your true self through conversations and lessons shared. Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the Faith in Action podcast with me, your host, Tinashe Mujera. Super excited, as always, to stream a new episode and to have you guys join us or listen in. I have again an exciting, amazing, powerful guest speaker who is joining us for this Faith in Action podcast. And she's going to be talking about aligning yourselves or ourselves to purpose, particularly focusing on embracing healing and also mental health and wellness. I won't spill the beans as yet. I just want to talk about Authentically Woman, as you've seen from the ad. Do join the movement. Again, it's a healing circle for women where we embrace different perspectives, particularly in authenticity, in truth, in transparency, and honesty. And we encourage women to come together that we may all heal together. Talk about 2024. Goodness, I don't even want to deep dive into that. A lot of women have been saying that it's been the most. It's been the most, and it's important that you get yourself aligned within a group that helps you to stay encouraged, motivated, healed, and also remain positive in times such as these. I'm excited again. The name of the guest speaker is Anytah Malunga. She is a mental health activist, and we all know that October is the month of mental health awareness. And what better way than to bring in a guest who is going to be talking about mental health, but again, like I said, aligning it to purpose and aligning it to embracing healing, particularly inner child healing. She's got a beautiful story to share with us, and without wasting any more time, Faith in Action podcast listeners, please help me to welcome a beautiful, powerful, mighty woman of faith. Her name is Anytah Malunga. Anytah, welcome to the Faith in Action podcast.
Thank you so much, Tinashe, for having me. Greetings to the listeners at home. It's very lovely to be here. I look forward to it.
Thank you, beautiful sis. We are looking forward to having you share your wisdom, your story, your path, your journey, the work that you do that's impacting communities, particularly marginalized communities, the work you're doing with the youth. We're super excited and thank you for honoring the invite. It's such a short notice. Goodness me, and you're just like, I am coming. I was like, that is faith in action. And so I'm excited and really thank you again for allowing yourself to take time off your busy schedule to be with us on the Faith in Action podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Now, who is Anytah? I know I said a little bit, but we want to hear more. We want to hear about this person. Yes, the work she does, but who is this woman of faith? Who is, what does she represent? And, what does she believe in? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Anytah Malunga is a sustained little girl from KZN, and I was born in Durban, and then my family later moved to Potchefstroom in the southern coast of KwaZulu Natal. So I was born in the deep rural area of KwaMadlala location, where I grew up with my family, both my parents and my two siblings. I come from very humble beginnings. So I remember when we met the first time, I did highlight a few things about my journey where I've been. So I come from a deeply impoverished background where everything was a struggle. I lacked so many things, but God has sustained me beautifully through everything. Maybe just to get into that in my upbringing and my background a little bit for the listeners to have an idea of what I'm talking about. So, as I mentioned, that I grew up, I was born in Durban, KZN, and then we later moved to Port Shepstone, KwaZulu Natal. So when we moved, the situation was terrible at home. My parents were both not working. Everything was going terribly wrong. And when we moved, our house had been repossessed, the one that we had back in Durban. We had now moved to a house that was previously owned by my paternal grandmother. It was in a terrible condition. It was a two-roomed house, I remember correctly. And when we moved in, the house was not roofed because my grandmother had not been using it for a very long time. So we got there with the help of the community. They helped us with roofing material, but that was only enough for one room, to roof just one room, not the second one. And I remember a day when, around that same time, sorry, I didn't mention that. Around that same time, my mom had recently given birth to my little sister. So I remember this one day, it was pouring, raining terribly. And now we don't even have proper doors, we don't have windows, we're using metal and planks just to hide and cover the windows and the door area. It was pouring. My mom was the only one who was using the mattress because she had a little baby, my sister. We all had to be on our feet, and the water was coming up to our knees. My mom is a woman of faith because she's still alive. I remember she would always say this one Bible verse, and she would say it in isiZulu that entabeni kaJehova kuyabonelelwa. You will not lack anything if God is with you. She would minister in the most difficult of times. And we went through that around the ages of 7 years old. I had already been selling curry powder around my area just to provide for my family because my mom was not able to get a job since she had recently given birth. So, what I'm trying to say is, Anytah is someone who's been through so much, but for a reason not just to sit with my pain and dwell in it, but to use it to impact the lives of other people. Hence, the work that I do right now with rural community development, women empowerment, mental health, wellness, and awareness, as well as women empowerment or youth development. I don't know if I've mentioned that already.
Wow, Anita, that for me is it's something else. I mean, I can't explain really the depth of what that is and how it shaped you or what it did in you to be the woman that you are today and the becoming. You know, we read about the book Becoming, but I mean, this is Anytah becoming. And we want to hear about that because talking about where you come from and looking at you now does not align at all. It's like when I look at you and I hear you speak, I'm hearing somebody who went to this bougie school, who had it all together, and now the story that you share and this doesn't align. And I think that is where the depth of what we want to hear and learn from you, from your wisdom, sits in today. Now, sis, you talk about a sustained little girl, and then you also speak about the community helped us to roof this two-roomed house. And then you do work in marginalized communities. Is that what has almost encouraged or motivated you to say, because the community helped us in that time. Hence, I want to also give back to these marginalized communities in the best way that I can. Is that why you are involved in community development?
Absolutely. It's certainly part of the reason I started to just tap into my passion, because I've always been passionate about helping and extending myself, using my gifts and abilities to just be there for other people. But I think the main thing that drove me to that point to just put it in action, not just leave it as a passion, as something I've always wanted to do, but actively do it, was realizing how difficult it was for me when I was in that position. And in my area, we lacked everything, not just resources that maybe if you think about a rural community, you normally think they are poor, maybe they don't have access to quality education, or they don't have enough money for food to just take care of themselves, they don't have money for clothes and all of that. But we lacked everything, including knowledge, things that are even free that other people have access to. So I wanted to bridge that gap and be that of which I did not have as a little girl growing up in Guamatala.
Sis. I mean, okay, there we have it. Faith in Action podcast listeners and watchers. You've heard who Anytah is, where she comes from, her background, and what she represents. Now, we want to get into this beautiful topic of mental health, particularly in this month of October, where we really advocate for mental health awareness. I mean, mental health just started, I think, a few years ago. I mean, it's always been there, but I think never voiced out really. And I think it's about 3, 4 years ago that people have started coming out and sharing their stories and what they've gone through and really advocating for mental health. Now, you as a mental health activist, what is mental health? What does it mean? Because some people hear about it but have still not assimilated the depth and the understanding of what it is. Some of them just think it's stress and depression only. What is mental health? And in this month of October, where we talk about mental health awareness, what is it that people should be looking out for or should be doing to really make sure that we voice out about this particular topic?
Okay, so the simplest way I always use to define what mental health is that look at your physiological health. Physically, you are vulnerable to a variety of sicknesses or medical conditions, and they vary in their effect and in their levels. For example, you may suffer from flu or a headache, which could be considered as not that serious. And then you have some of the other medical conditions that are now very serious and that can lead to maybe death or even greater challenges in terms of your physiological health. Now, take that and view it from a point of view of your psychological health. It is all part of the same system. Since you have your body, you also have your psychological health. It is not exempt from sicknesses. So when we say people have mental health challenges, we are not saying they are manic or they are losing their minds. You are feeling pressure, you are feeling overwhelmed, and it may translate to something that is similar to flu if you look at from the lens of physiological health, but now it's flu for your mind, for your mental state. For example, in simple terms, so in you mentioned that where some people when they look at mental health, they think of stress, they think of different things. So we have what is called acute stress. Now, acute stress, an example would be you are going to work, or I have a studio session with Tinashe, and I realized on my way that I'm now stuck in traffic. I'm panicking because now time, we are running out of time. what is happening to me at that moment, as my body is sending that message to my brain and putting me in that flight or fight state, I am feeling the pressure from knowing that I'm supposed to be meeting with Tinashe at this time, but I can't because I'm running late. And then we have episodic acute stress, which an example that I can use for that is when someone leads a very taxing lifestyle or a chaotic or busy lifestyle. For example, your job. Maybe let's say for people who work as artists in the maybe entertainment industry, those people always have to attend gigs. You are exhausted because sometimes you need to rehearse for long hours just to make sure that you are fully prepared and you are able to deliver to your fans or your audience. Now, for you to be dealing with that all the time from the life that you are living, it's now pressure that is there frequently. It's not like it's acute stress, it's only happening because I'm stressed about being stuck in traffic, or I'm stressed because I'm at the airport and I now realize that I forgot my passport. You are always stressed because your work is demanding, you always have deadlines to meet. And then we have chronic stress, which is where it becomes very difficult and it may result in a lot of different things that are even more severe and more challenging for your overall health. Now, chronic stress, an example would be feeling the same pressures. Maybe what analogy can I use? Let's say this bottle. If I have this water, this bottle, and I'm holding it just for maybe a second, I drink from it and I put it down, it's not going to exert any pressure or overwhelm in my body. But if I were to hold it in my hand for 5 hours, even if the content inside does not change, it remains this much. But the pressure and the feeling that I will get in my body will be so unbearable because now there's numbness that I'm experiencing. I've been carrying the same weight for an extended period of time. So that is what chronic stress does to a person. If you are not able or you don't have ways to cope or coping mechanisms that are healthy for you as a person, and you are always holding on to those stresses of life, and maybe you're not even aware what your stresses are, it becomes that situation where you are now, it feels like you have been holding on to this same container for 24 hours. That can result to medical conditions such as your depression, your schizophrenia, different kinds that are even more serious. So just to emphasize the first point, admitting that you need help or admitting that you have a mental health challenge doesn't mean that you are crazy or you are a manic. You may just have flu, psychological flu. So that is what mental health really is.
Better way than you hearing it from you. I've never had it explained that way. Thank you, because I'm also being enlightened right now, and a lot of things are coming to my mind. Because really, when we talk mental health, there's a stigma to it. A lot of people always think that you are going crazy. You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. They don't want to be associated with you, or you might just lose it now. And so thank you so much, sis, for bringing such light to what mental health is, how to dictate it, and also encouraging our listeners and watchers to really get to a place where people admit and say, I actually have an issue and a problem and I need help. And it starts there. I think that place of awareness to say, I need
Yes.
help. And so help will come. And that's why we have you here today, because I'm sure after this, a lot of people who have the need will be able to get in touch with you. Now, I want to talk about um, this aspect of mental health, but you being a woman of faith as well. Um, I mean, in Christendom, you almost find a lot of people say, almost there's a stigma as well there, and we almost want to cover it up and not get the help that we must fully, and we almost say, no, let's pray, which is good. I'm not saying prayer solves everything and anything, But I think there's a moment in time, and I believe it goes back to even when we talk about medical practices, where we go to the hospital, where we go see a doctor because they're an expert in that field and they understand the biology of the body. So mental health versus faith. How do we find that reconciliation and alignment? And also, you as a woman of faith, where do you draw the line, and what do you think, our listeners and our watchers should be aware of in terms of that?
That's a very good question, and I really love it because I have a lived experience of that stigma from church, if I may put it that way. Because really, our faith community sometimes does not understand. How can you admit and say it's like openly that you are dealing with mental health challenges when you have God, who is your source of strength and everything, right? So
Yeah.
I remember a time, I believe it was around 2021, I was in the depths of mentally. I was dealing with a lot of pressure to a point that I remember times when I I would sit and not pray from a point of just knowing who God is and knowing my relationship with Him, but pray out of desperation because I was so tired of how I was feeling. I was even suicidal in my thoughts. I had suicidal ideation. I remember this one time I prayed to God, so overwhelmed, so desperate for change, because the main stressor for me was financially related. I had just left my job of 6 years from a detective agency, and now I moved to a different province in the hopes that it would not take long for me to. And now I get to Gauteng, my hopes are very high. I'm convinced that maybe in a period of like 2 months or 3 months or maybe four, nothing above five, I would have gotten another job. And that doesn't happen. Now, when it doesn't happen, I pray out of desperation, God, when I left KZN, knew for a fact you would come through for me. Why have you forsaken me? I went to my pastor this one time, telling him how I was feeling, how I was struggling mentally. And he said, I understand that it's a condition that we cannot avoid, that you need at some point, if it becomes very severe, you need medical attention for it. I'm not ignoring that. However, what we sometimes do as believers of God is we dethrone God from his throne and we idolize this sickness, which is depression or anxiety. We create an idol out of how we are feeling at that particular moment, and we close our eyes physically and spiritually and our ears not to hear and receive anything else from God. And we go around telling the entire world that I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I have anxiety. And that becomes what is seated on the throne, no longer God. So I got to understand where he was coming from. Because as a person in that state, it's very rare that you have time to really nurture that relationship you have with God. Majority
Yeah.
of the time, you are just so immersed in your own struggle. You can't see anything else. You can't see
Mm,
a way out. So I think what we can do, we can just approach it from a point of empathy, knowing how a person in that state is feeling at that particular moment. But in as much as we can do so, let us not forget who God is in that season of our lives, because help comes from Him at the end of
yeah.
the day. Even if you
Mm,
can consult maybe psychologists, psychosocial support workers, or anything, or anyone else in the medical profession, but at the end of the day, there comes so much clarity from you not removing God from his throne, because at the end of the day, that is the source of everything that you need for your existence.
Wow. I love it. I just love how you unpacked and you settled that. I'm not even going to go into it because I believe the listeners and watchers have had it for themselves. And I love what you say. Do not dethrone God. Don't take him away from his throne because at the end of it all, he sustains everything and all. Thank you, Anytah. Now, sis, you talk about inner child healing a lot. And of course you've shared a little bit about your journey as a young girl and the some of the adversities you faced, growing up with the family. And can you explain what this means, particularly inner child healing, that aspect? But I want you to tie it into your experience and how you felt you were damaged, or rather experienced pain and sort of that deep pain, that wound you needed to get healing from as a child, and how your faith helped you to come out of, or to rather navigate that.
Okay, so describing inner child healing, I would have to start by describing trauma faced by a person in those years of developing as a child. So I think if I remember this definition correctly, I read it in a book a while ago and I fell in love with it. It said a trauma is the absence of, is either a time where there was an absence of something, a lack of something, or too much of something. Now, what does that mean? A lack of something. As a child, you were neglected, you were not assured, validated, you were not loved the way that a child is supposed to be loved, you were not listened to. That is a lack of something, a time when there was a lack of something. And it also says it could also be a time when there was too much of something. Now, what does that mean? Let's say, for example, your parents or the people that were raising you up did not really, how can I put it? They didn't have boundaries. They didn't teach you the system of boundaries. That as much as they can be, maybe we come from a wealthy home or a home that has pretty much everything that is comfortable financially, but there's boundaries in how you live and how you consume things. If there was too much of things and you don't know boundaries, it can also translate to some degree of trauma, although it's not similar to the one that you feel when there's a lack of something. Under the same breath, when there is too much of something, let's say you were abused physically and it happened every day of your life as a child. That was something you didn't need as a child because you were young, you had not developed fully. You were just still trying to navigate your journey on this earth. And there was this abuse, physical abuse, maybe sexual abuse, and it was too much in a body that cannot even handle that. That is trauma. So now you say you'd like me to speak about it from my own lived experiences. How I started falling in love or just trying to learn more, educate myself about the trauma and inner child healing topic was from observing the state, the mental state of my father as I was growing up, which also led to some of my traumas. But I tried to understand that, okay, when my dad had children, myself, my siblings, he was just a first timer here in the world. He had not done this before. I'm also here for the first time. I don't know what God has in store for my journey. I'm just here going where the journey takes me. But now for him, it's different because he had suffered a lot of abuse growing up. abuse in terms of emotional, mental abuse, and physical abuse, being beaten up. So he didn't know how else to parent a child, how else to be emotionally available for a child. He didn't have an emotional room for us, particularly me. I remember when I was very young, I used to think that maybe I was not loved by my family. Because yes, my mom was there, but my dad, you know how dads are. He is sort of
Yeah.
like, we look up to him, we need his approval most of the time. That was my case. So in that position, I always felt like he related or he loved my sisters more than he did with me. But then everything changed when I allowed myself to just try to go back in time and see what happened to him in order for him to behave the way that he does even now. Even now, he's a good person. I'm not saying this to speak badly about him. I'm just telling you what unaddressed trauma does to a person and how much the effect of it can go on if it's still lingering and unaddressed. So that's what happened to my dad. So since he did not have an emotional room for us as children, for everyone, the family, my mom as well, there was a lot of lack emotionally. And there were times where it took a while for me specifically to develop emotionally and mentally in other things. I remember that before I got saved, how I started romantic relationships, I didn't even know why I was allowing myself to get into a romantic relationship. I didn't even have a clear need for it, but I had just this deep void of not having a father who has an emotional relationship with me. And then I used that own trauma that I experienced to go and find a relationship or find that emotional relationship from someone else.
Yeah.
So from then, I was like, if it's possible for us, it doesn't matter what you've been through. We come from different walks of life. You've been exposed to different things, different traumatic events, and you are still going to be experiencing different kinds of trauma as you grow up as a person. However, the most severe kind of trauma is the one that you experienced as a child because you didn't have the mental and the overall capacity to deal
Sure.
with it, to handle it,
Yeah.
to allow or teach yourself to reprogram your mindset after facing that trauma and bring yourself out of that dark place and use your inner tools or inner abilities to then
Yeah.
move on with your life as a sort of like a healed person. So sometimes we have scarred little girls and boys trapped inside of us because we dealt with so much, we suffered so much pain as we were growing up. And if that child is not addressed, is not tended to, that wound that they suffered is not nursed, they have a way, those things have a way of manifesting in the most unexpected way as you grow older. So that is what inner child healing is. Try to find out, be aware. You mentioned something very important. Everything starts with awareness. And with
Mm.
pretty much everything, not just mental health,
Yeah.
the same thing with inner child healing. It starts with awareness. Know what happened as you were growing up and how it may be affecting you right now as an adult, and find ways to address that.
Who tended and nurtured your wound, and what was that process like?
It takes a village to raise a. I we all know that I don't give that credit to myself or my wisdom or anything like that, because I would not have known even that there was some brokenness in me or some wounds that were lingering inside of me. But the process involved a lot of people, mentors, spiritual mentors, my pastors, because since I've changed provinces, previously I was attending church in KZN. I remember that I presented myself as a normal person, but a person that is older and that is spiritually, I could say, alert to discerning some things about people. They can tell when something is wrong with someone.
Mm,
So my pastor, oh, the pastor's wife, I remember this one time came to me and was like, I see you are a very respectful and well presented young lady, but I'd just like to get to know you, talk to you about a little things. And everything is here in the hearts. What you say to people is something that is here. So she knew that the minute I start talking and I become comfortable enough to share more about myself, she will know what is in here. And then
yeah.
maybe perhaps that will relate to what she had been assuming or picking up from her spirit of discernment. So I started saying different things. I'm a child. I'm just a little girl. So I'm like, oh, this. And she was like, I understand that I am like your mother from church, but tell me, are you in a relationship? Remember
Mm,
now, I am not saved from my own conviction that I had with God. I grew up in church. My dad was sort of like a pastor. So I know this. I do it out of habit, not from knowing what it means and what it does to a person. So, yes, I'm dating at the time. I begin to tell my pastor, the pastor's wife, that yeah, I'm dating and it's like this. I start spilling everything, even the challenges that I'm facing in the relationship. And at that moment, she could have sat and said, you are not even supposed to be dating. Because, first of all, you are young, and secondly, you are a Christian. She didn't say that. She allowed me to go on and on and on and say everything. And after that, she said, if it is, if you are comfortable with it, can I just be there for you, to mentor you, and to just have, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like you are struggling with something, there's an emotional burden you are dealing with, just come to me, let's talk about it. And the more she opened that door for us to talk about things like that, and she began to pour unto me, I realized that majority of the decisions and the routes that I was taking in life were influenced by my traumas. And that's
mm.
where my journey with healing began. From then, I just met different people that helped in different ways to a point that I am in right now.
Wow, beautiful. It takes a village, like you said, and I think the listeners and the watchers are hearing it as well. It does take a village. Again, self-awareness. Sometimes you're not aware, but the more you speak and open up to certain people that you can trust, that you feel are a safe space, you are able to get the healing from that inner child trauma or that inner child pain and wound that you are facing. You speak so quite a lot about the father wound, and I absolutely love that topic because I also relate and I talk about it a lot. And of course, girls and their dads. I mean, remember, a father brings identity into a girl's child. And most of our young girls are getting into these relationships because they're seeking acceptance and that validation, the warmth that they did not receive from home. So thank you so much for sharing that, sis. And I love that you said we need to nurture, we need to tender to that inner child wound. Go back to it and go nest it again until you get to a place of healing. Time, 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 time. I always say when we are on the Faith in Action podcast, time is never our friend because the conversations are so wholesome and time tends to just steal that away from us. So I'm going to jump into your community development work. and of course relating it to your faith. Um, you've really led so many initiatives, particularly with the marginalized communities. And I just want you to talk us through that, and how you navigated your Christian values of compassion, of service, of stewardship, and how they influence your work, and how you are able to remain consistent in that. Just tell us more about the work. And I also want you to talk about Purpose Aligned Generation Foundation, which I know is an organization that you have founded, that talks a lot about purpose. So if you can tie those two together and just tell us a little bit more, and how your faith has anchored you in navigating and being of service in those particular spaces.
Thank you so much, sis. I think I will start by explaining how the Purpose Aligned Generation Foundation came about. As I said in the beginning, that I had different passions growing up, especially for helping people and just being there, being of service to others. I always had this with me, and I've been doing some voluntary work to some organizations as a young person, but I not once did I think I would have an organization myself. Now, you remember what I said. I don't remember which question exactly I was responding to, but what I said that there was a time when I had moved from KZN to Gauteng in search of employment. So before then, maybe around 2019, 2020, I was very active with charity and community service work. I was doing a lot of things. There's an organization in Durban that has children that come from abusive like backgrounds. So I remember during that time, anything I get from my salary, I would buy maybe groceries, toiletries, anything, and take it to that organization. Now, when I then came to Gauteng, now I don't have a job, I don't have anything that I'm doing. What I came in search for, which is employment, did not materialize. I got different interviews, but not a job. However, what I was not even looking for was that I did not even had in mind is what started to begin its journey and have its journey unfold. So I was invited in different platforms as a speaker. I was already a speaker as I was employed in my previous job, but I was not doing it as a profession, and I didn't even understand what it meant. Now I'm this side, I'm looking for work, but I'm getting all these invitations that are not even paying, but they just allowing me to just tap into that purpose and
Wow.
begin that journey. So that's when I started to look at it from a different eye and said, let me just make this a formal organization and register it. So I could say Purpose Aligned Generation Foundation officially started in 2021. The reason it is called Purpose Aligned Generation Foundation, it's because I was looking at my life at that moment. I know that for some people, sometimes we feel like purpose is something that we need to search for. It's something that we need to look out for and pursue. But sometimes that is not how the journey is with purpose. Sometimes it finds you, and it brings you out of your comfort zone in the most brutal way. Instead of me finding a job when I desperately needed it, instead of me finding that financial stability, that did not happen. But purpose knocked aggressively at my door and found me and called me to tap fully into it and begin to do the work that God created me to do. And then that's how the name came about. I then decided to call it Purpose Aligned Generation Foundation. And the reason for that, with all the programs that we do, we focus, as mentioned, mostly on youth development. We focus on women empowerment as well as rural community development. And most of our programs, I approach them when I think of a project or a program. I approach it firstly from a point of what is the need that we are trying to attend to at this particular moment? Do we need to upskill these young, bright, and amazing individuals? Or what we are doing is we are igniting that light that they have within themselves. I believe everyone has a purpose. Everyone was born golden. Everyone was born mighty and with a divine purpose. So our organization is just there to allow and propel everyone to a point where they fully tap into their purpose and they walk boldly in their journey.
Wow, so beautifully said. I mean, you definitely are a great speaker. I've heard you at an event that I had to attend, I think, sometime last week. And I was like, absolutely awed. It's like, who is this woman? You speak so well, so eloquently. So, indeed, like you say, sometimes purpose finds you. And yeah, such a beautiful way of telling that story, sis. And thank you for sharing that part with us. And I believe that for a lot of people that are seeking purpose again, there is a different way that she's put it here. And sometimes we think it's so far fetched. You know, we want to, it's like we're running to find it. Let me go find it. And she says,
Yes.
yeah, sometimes it finds you. You just need to look within and take a step back and be still and know, and then hear the voice that is speaking in the moment. Sure,
Yes.
again, time says we left with about 3 minutes to round this off. You say this a lot, and I heard it again last week. Um, no, where is that saying? Where is that quote? There we go. I have been everywhere through it all to be right here now. I believe that that quote speaks volumes. Do you want to take us through why that quotation, why it resonates with you? And how has your faith helped you keep moving forward even when the journey was hard? Because for me, it speaks about a woman of virtue and resilience and of stature and of faith and who is so positive and grounded. I have been everywhere through it all to be right here, right now. Take us through, sis.
Oh, that is the one question that is making me kind of emotional. And to save time, because I know I like just unpacking things for a very long period of time. How I would answer that is I remember times in my journey of faith as I was going through different seasons of my life, seasons of lack, seasons of suffering, seasons of confusion, not remembering what I already had within myself, which is my natural tools, natural gifts that God has given me. And in those seasons, I would be so overwhelmed. I would struggle so much to understand what is going on and how I'm going to pull myself out of it. Now, that was the first mistake. Me thinking that I had the potential and the power to pull myself and not depending on God, the author of my life. So, in those seasons, what would happen is I would forsake God. I would pray just out of habit and just maybe pray threatening him. Hey, bro, I've burned your believer before, like intentionally. So why have you forsaken me? Now God looks at the heart. He knows that this one is threatening me, and I don't understand why she would even think of doing that. And seeing myself now with everywhere that I've been, and how those difficult moments felt like they were the end of me. It felt like I could just die on the spot and I did not have a way out. And looking at how much wisdom, how much purpose, how much clarity and direction came from serving those seasons. So, what I'd like to end with to the listeners at home is serve your seasons. Serve your season with diligence. But as you serve your season, don't dwell in the effects of the pain and the suffering you are feeling at that moment. Try to have faith in action, actionable faith. Do
That's
something.
right.
Tap into your passions. Tap into your abilities, your potential, but also serve your season. Sometimes God just wants you there because sometimes you don't have to gain anything monetary or have any financial gain out of that season, but He knows why you are in that season. So serve it with diligence.
Wow. Sure. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Anytah Malunga, a mental health activist, the founder of Purpose Aligned Generation Foundation. She is into mental health and wellness. She is into women empowerment. She is into youth development. She is also one woman who would go into those marginalized communities, the communities that we all don't really want to go into. And she will serve diligently and do all that she has to do to make a difference and to bring transformation. Sis, thank you so, so much for sharing your wisdom today on the Faith in Action podcast. We don't take it for granted. I mean, I would have wanted to hear more and of the unpacking, of course, because I love it when you unpack and you take us through even what you said about mental health, you know, how you were explaining trauma as well, how you were explaining the inner child wound and all, you know, that makes you you and the work that you do. Really, thank you so much for gracing the Faith in Action podcast platform with your wonderful words and wisdom. We appreciate the time you've taken out of your busy schedule, and we just speak more blessings upon the work that you do. And to all of the listeners or watchers that really want to get in touch with Anytah Malunga, do watch out for her name. She can tell us this. You can tell us a little bit about where people can find you, what platforms yeah. Please just tell us.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm available on LinkedIn as Anytah Malunga. You obviously see the spelling of the name at the bottom of the screen. I'm available on Instagram, Facebook, as well as TikTok. And my email address will be provided on the screen.
Amazing. Thank you so much, sis. I really appreciate it once more.
Thank you.
And to Faith in Action podcast listeners and watchers, this is yet another beautiful episode where we talk mental health awareness in the month of October, but we also unpack it and aligning it to purpose, finding your purpose, and also finding that healing within. She says, use your inner tools, your inner gifts, your inner
Your inner
talents, whatever.
resources.
What's that, sis? Please say it out.
Your inner resources.
Your inner resources. There we go. There we go. Your inner resources. Tap into them and make the most out of them. She says, serve in your seasons. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much. And it's goodbye for now till we meet again on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Tinashe Mujera. I'm an author, I'm a marketplace professional, and I'm a woman of God. I am a representation of tested faith. I represent my healed wounds that left ugly scars. This is the Faith in Action podcast that has been created to help you find the journey to your true self through conversations and lessons shared.